Book plus core thesis. Taylor Swift's Girl Squad was never just about friendship. In 2015, it felt impossible to escape Taylor Swift. She was everywhere. Award shows, magazine covers, social media feeds, music videos. And wherever Taylor went, there always seemed to be a crowd of famous women standing right beside her. Selena Gomez, Karlie Kloss, Gigi Hadid, Cara Delevingne, Lily Aldridge, and many more. The media gave them a name that quickly became part of pop culture: the Girl Squad. To millions of fans, they represented the ultimate friendship circle: successful, confident, beautiful, supportive. A modern sisterhood that seemed untouchable. But not everyone saw it that way. Critics called the squad exclusive, manufactured, performative. Some even argued that it looked less like friendship and more like a carefully managed brand. And as the years went on, the criticism only grew louder. Because the more visible the squad became, the more people started asking a simple question: was this really a group of friends? Or was it something else entirely? The answer is more complicated than most people realize. Because the story of Taylor Swift's Girl Squad isn't really about Karlie Kloss, or Gigi Hadid, or even Selena Gomez. At its core, this story is about Taylor Swift herself. A young woman who spent years being defined by her relationships. A young woman who couldn't escape headlines about her dating life. A young woman who watched the public reduce her career to a punchline. For years, critics portrayed Taylor as a serial dater. Every boyfriend became a headline. Every breakup became a joke. Every new song became another excuse for the media to roll its eyes. No matter how successful she became, the narrative stayed the same. Then something changed. Almost overnight, Taylor stopped appearing alongside famous men and started appearing alongside famous women. Lots of them. The shift was impossible to ignore. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about who Taylor was dating. It was about who Taylor was standing next to. And for a while, it worked perfectly. The Girl Squad became one of the most recognizable celebrity groups of the 2010s. It dominated headlines, defined an era, and helped transform Taylor Swift's public image. But what looked like a fairy tale from the outside would eventually become one of the most controversial chapters of her career. Because the same thing that helped build Taylor's image would later become one of the reasons people turned against her. To understand how that happened, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to 2014. Back to the moment the squad was born. Origin story: how Taylor Swift built the most famous friend group in the world. The year was 2014. Taylor Swift was entering one of the most important transitions of her career. For years, she had been one of the biggest stars in music. But despite her success, the public conversation around Taylor rarely focused on her achievements. Instead, it focused on her dating life. Late-night hosts joked about it. Tabloids obsessed over it. Interviewers constantly brought it up. No matter what Taylor accomplished, she often found herself reduced to a stereotype: the girl who wrote songs about her ex-boyfriends. By her own admission, she was growing frustrated. She wanted people to see a different side of her life. And that different side already existed: her friendships. Around this time, Taylor began speaking more publicly about the women in her life. Not just childhood friends. Not just industry acquaintances. But a growing circle of female friendships that stretched across music, fashion, film, and television. Of course, not everyone who was photographed with Taylor was actually part of the squad. Over the years, internet lists would become increasingly exaggerated. Some even included people who barely interacted with her. Others somehow included men despite the name literally being Girl Squad. In reality, the group was much smaller and easier to understand. There were three distinct circles. The first was Taylor's genuine longtime friends outside the spotlight. People like Abigail Anderson, one of Taylor's closest friends since her teenage years. Abigail wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't a model. She wasn't chasing headlines. She was simply part of Taylor's life long before the world was paying attention. There were also friends like Ashley Avignon, a stylist Taylor met through mutual connections years earlier. These friendships felt grounded. They existed before the cameras arrived. The second circle consisted of Taylor's famous longtime friends. The most notable example was Selena Gomez. The two met during the Disney era while both were dating members of the Jonas Brothers. Ironically, those relationships didn't last. But their friendship did. As years passed, Taylor and Selena became inseparable. They attended award shows together, supported each other publicly, and repeatedly referred to each other as best friends. While many friendships in Hollywood came and went, there survived nearly every major chapter of their careers. Then there was the third category. The group that would eventually define the squad's public image. Taylor's rapidly expanding network of famous friends. Models, actresses, singers, influencers, women who were becoming cultural icons in their own right. Some friendships began through social media, others through industry events, fashion shows, award ceremonies, mutual friends, backstage meetings. Taylor was unusually social during this period. And one by one, new names entered the orbit. Karlie Kloss, Cara Delevingne, Gigi Hadid, Martha Hunt, Lily Aldridge, Haim, Ellie Goulding. The list kept growing. And unlike many celebrity friendships that remained private, these friendships became incredibly visible. Photos appeared everywhere. Birthday parties, road trips, holiday celebrations, award shows, concert appearances, social media posts. From the outside, it looked like Taylor had assembled the Avengers of celebrity culture. And that's exactly why people became fascinated. But here's what made the squad different. The friendships were real. People often assume the entire thing was a publicity stunt. The evidence suggests otherwise. These women spent time together away from cameras. They traveled together, celebrated milestones together, supported each other privately. The friendships themselves were genuine. But at the same time, something else was happening. The friendships were becoming part of Taylor Swift's public image. And that distinction would eventually change everything. Because the squad wasn't just a friend group anymore. It was becoming a symbol. A symbol of female friendship. A symbol of success. And most importantly, a symbol of the new Taylor Swift. The question was no longer whether the friendships were real. The question was why the world was being invited to watch them so closely. And the answer had everything to do with branding. The rebrand. How the Girl Squad helped rewrite Taylor Swift's image. To understand why the Girl Squad became such a massive cultural phenomenon, we need to understand where Taylor Swift was emotionally and professionally in 2014. At the time, she wasn't struggling commercially. Far from it. She was one of the biggest stars on earth. The problem wasn't her success. The problem was her reputation. For years, media coverage of Taylor had been dominated by one topic: her relationships. Every new boyfriend became front-page news. Every breakup became late-night comedy material. Every song release sparked another round of speculation about which ex she was writing about. The narrative had become impossible to escape. Even when Taylor tried to laugh along with the jokes, the story never changed. She was still being reduced to her dating history. Then came Star 1989 Star, a project that represented much more than a musical shift from country to pop. It was also a complete image transformation. Taylor later explained that she was tired of hearing people say she only wrote breakup songs. She wanted to prove that there was more to her life than romance. And if the music alone couldn't change the narrative, her public image would. Almost overnight, the focus shifted. Instead of asking who Taylor was dating, people started asking who Taylor was hanging out with. The Girl Squad became the visual representation of this new chapter. And it worked brilliantly. For the first time in years, conversations about Taylor weren't centered around boyfriends. They were centered around friendship, empowerment, community, success. The squad wasn't just a group of friends anymore. It became part of the Taylor Swift brand. And nowhere was that more obvious than her friendship with Karlie Kloss. The two became one of the most talked about celebrity friendships of the decade. Before they had even properly met, Taylor publicly mentioned wanting to bake cookies with Karlie. Karlie famously responded by asking, "Your kitchen or mine?" Soon afterward, they became inseparable. They traveled together, appeared together constantly, shared magazine covers, and generated endless headlines. Their friendship became a story of its own. One of the clearest examples came in 2015, when Taylor and Karlie appeared together on the cover of Vogue. What made the feature remarkable wasn't fashion, or music, or business. It was friendship. The article focused heavily on their relationship and the larger group surrounding Taylor. The message was unmistakable. Taylor Swift wasn't being presented as a global pop star. She was being presented as the center of an extraordinary social universe. The woman everyone wanted to be friends with. And to be fair, many people genuinely loved that image. Friends often describe Taylor as thoughtful and supportive. She organized birthday celebrations, sent gifts, offered advice, made time for people. There are countless stories suggesting she truly cared about the friendships she built. But there was another reason the squad resonated so strongly with the public. Timing. The mid-2010s were a unique cultural moment. Conversations about female empowerment were becoming more mainstream than ever before. For many young women, friendship was increasingly being celebrated rather than dismissed. And Taylor leaned into that message. The squad wasn't marketed as a clique. It was marketed as a sisterhood. A group of successful women supporting one another instead of competing. In interviews, Taylor repeatedly emphasized kindness, loyalty, and uplifting other women. The message was simple. Women didn't have to tear each other down. They could succeed together. It was a powerful idea, and millions of people embraced it. But there was one problem. The bigger the squad became, the harder it was to control how people interpreted it. Because while fans saw empowerment, others started seeing something very different. Not a sisterhood, not inclusivity, but exclusivity. And that criticism would soon become impossible to ignore. From squad goals to mean girls. When the backlash began, for a while, the girl squad seemed untouchable. The photos were everywhere. The headlines were overwhelmingly positive. And the public couldn't get enough. Then came Bad Blood. Released in 2015, the music video became one of the defining moments of Taylor Swift's career. On the surface, it was a blockbuster pop video. High-budget visuals, action sequences, explosions, celebrity cameos. But culturally, it was much bigger than that. Because Bad Blood transformed the girl squad from a collection of friendships into a public institution. Nearly every major female celebrity associated with Taylor appeared in the video. Models, actresses, singers, friends, acquaintances. Together, they formed an army led by Taylor Swift. The video shattered records. It became one of the most talked about music videos of the decade. And for many fans, it represented something exciting. Powerful women working together. Women taking center stage. Women being the heroes. But critics saw something else. Because by this point, everyone knew the song was widely believed to be about Katy Perry. And suddenly, what looked like female empowerment to some looked like public humiliation to others. The optics became difficult to ignore. Taylor wasn't standing alone against an enemy. She appeared to have an entire army behind her. An army filled with some of the most famous women in entertainment. Whether intentional or not, the message felt different depending on who was watching. Supporters saw solidarity. Critics saw exclusion. Supporters saw friendship. Critics saw a popularity contest. And this was the moment the public conversation began to shift. The squad was no longer being viewed solely through a positive lens. Questions started appearing. Was this really about empowering women? Or was it only empowering certain women? The criticism wasn't always fair, but it was becoming louder. One issue appeared repeatedly: diversity. Many critics pointed out that the squad often looked remarkably similar. Most members were young. Most were conventionally attractive. Most were extremely successful. And many fit a very specific beauty standard. As a result, what was intended to feel inspirational sometimes felt unattainable. The squad wasn't simply being presented as friendship. It was being presented as an ideal that many people felt excluded from. Even celebrities began questioning the image. Some argued that friendship should feel welcoming, not aspirational, not exclusive, not something that resembled a private club. Others pointed out another contradiction. Taylor often spoke about women supporting women. Yet some of her most public conflicts involved other women. The feud with Katy Perry became the most obvious example. To critics, it seemed difficult to promote sisterhood while simultaneously participating in one of pop culture's most famous rivalries. Then, there was another criticism. One that struck closer to the heart of Taylor's public image. Some people began arguing that her version of feminism felt selective. That she spoke passionately about issues that affected her personally, but was less vocal about broader conversations happening around her. Whether that criticism was entirely fair remains heavily debated, even today, because Taylor's record is complicated. On one hand, critics question parts of her public messaging. On the other hand, she played an important role in several conversations affecting women in the entertainment industry. Most notably, her highly publicized sexual assault case, where she countersued for a symbolic $1 The case became a major cultural moment, and many viewed it as a significant stand against harassment. Which is exactly why public opinion around Taylor became so divided. Neither side could fully claim she was entirely right, or entirely wrong. The reality existed somewhere in the middle. But while debates about feminism and exclusivity were growing, a much larger problem was approaching. One that would change Taylor Swift's career forever. Because criticism alone wasn't enough to destroy the girl squad. What happened next would. And it began with one of the most infamous celebrity feuds of the modern internet era. Taylor Swift, Kim Kardashian, and Kanye West. The fall. How Taylor Swift lost control of the narrative. By 2015, Taylor Swift seemed unstoppable. Star 1989 star had become a cultural phenomenon. The girl squad dominated headlines. Bad Blood was a massive success. And Taylor had successfully transformed her public image. For the first time in years, she wasn't being defined by her relationships. She was being defined by her influence. But history has a strange habit. The higher a public figure rises, the more intensely people search for reasons to bring them back down. And by 2016, many people were starting to feel exhausted by Taylor Swift's constant presence. She was everywhere. Award shows, fashion magazines, social media, television, radio. The squad itself had become impossible to avoid. What once felt exciting was beginning to feel excessive. Criticism that had been building quietly suddenly found a much larger target. And then Kanye West entered the story again. The relationship between Taylor and Kanye had already been one of the most famous rivalries in entertainment. Ever since the 2009 MTV Video Music Awards, their names had been linked together. Over the years, it seemed they had finally moved past the conflict. Taylor even presented Kanye with the Video Vanguard Award in 2015. From the outside, reconciliation appeared complete. Then everything changed. In early 2016, Kanye released the song Famous. One lyric immediately triggered controversy. Taylor publicly stated that she had never approved the line and objected to the way it referenced her. Kanye disagreed. Then Kim Kardashian entered the conflict. She released recordings of a phone conversation between Taylor and Kanye. The clips appeared to show Taylor approving parts of the song before its release. The internet reacted instantly. And brutally. For millions of people watching online, the situation seemed simple. Taylor had been caught lying. At least, that's what many believed at the time. The nuance disappeared almost overnight. Few people stopped to ask what exactly had been discussed. Few people examined what had been edited. Few people waited for additional context. The verdict arrived first. Social media exploded. Hashtags spread across the internet. Comment sections filled with snake emojis. The public image Taylor had spent years carefully rebuilding suddenly collapsed. And the girl squad collapsed with it. Because the squad had always depended on visibility. Photos. Appearances. Social media posts. Public support. When Taylor disappeared from public life, the squad disappeared too. Almost immediately, people began choosing sides. Some friends remained loyal. Selena Gomez publicly defended Taylor. Others quietly distanced themselves. Certain celebrities, who had once been associated with the squad, started emphasizing that they were never truly part of it. Some members had their own careers and reputations to protect. Others found themselves caught between competing friendships. And some simply wanted distance from a brand that had become controversial. For years, the girl squad had represented unity. Now it represented something very different. Association. And association suddenly carried risk. The public began scrutinizing every friendship, every appearance, every social media interaction. The narrative had completely flipped. The same friendships that once boosted Taylor's image were now being used as evidence against her. To many observers, the squad started looking less like a genuine group of friends and more like a carefully constructed image. Whether that perception was fair no longer mattered, because perception had become reality. The era was over. Not with a dramatic public breakup. Not with a major scandal between friends. But with something much quieter. People simply stopped wanting to be associated with the label. The girl squad didn't explode. It faded. And when Taylor finally returned to the spotlight with reputation, she returned as a very different person. The giant public friend group was gone. The constant photo opportunities were gone. The highly visible sisterhood was gone. Taylor Swift had learned an important lesson. The more people see, the more they believe they own. And the less they see, the harder it becomes to attack. But the end of the girl squad raises a fascinating question. Was the criticism actually fair? Or was the world judging female friendship by a standard that men never have to face? The real story? Was Taylor Swift's girl squad actually a mistake? Looking back now, it's easy to focus on the criticism, the headlines, the controversies, the internet jokes, the accusations of exclusivity. But nearly a decade later, an important question remains. Was the girl squad actually a failure? Or did it become a convenient symbol for frustrations that were much bigger than Taylor Swift herself? Because when you strip away the headlines, the reality becomes more complicated. Many of the friendships were real. Some of them still exist today. Taylor remains close with Selena Gomez. She's still connected to Gigi Hadid. The Haim sisters remain part of her inner circle. Over the years, new friendships formed with people like Sabrina Carpenter, Blake Lively, and Gracie Abrams. The difference is that we see far less of it. And that might be the most important lesson Taylor took from the entire experience. The original squad thrived in public. Every gathering became content. Every friendship became a story. Every photo became a headline. Eventually, the friendships themselves became inseparable from the brand. And once that happened, people stopped judging the relationships. They started judging the image. That's a difficult position for anyone to maintain. Especially when millions of strangers feel invited into your personal life. In many ways, the girl squad became a victim of its own success. It was so visible, so influential, so culturally dominant, that people began projecting their own feelings onto it. Some saw inspiration. Others saw exclusion. Some saw empowerment. Others saw privilege. And perhaps all of those interpretations were true at the same time. What makes the story fascinating is that it touches on something much deeper than celebrity friendships. It touches on acceptance. Because throughout Taylor Swift's career, one theme appears again and again. The desire to belong. The desire to be understood. The desire to be accepted. Years before the Girl Squad, Taylor spoke openly about feeling isolated during her school years. Feeling awkward. Feeling like she didn't fit in. Feeling like she wasn't one of the popular kids. Then, years later, she found herself surrounded by some of the most admired women in the world. Models. Actresses. Musicians. Cultural icons. From the outside, it looked like power. But perhaps part of it was something much more human. Perhaps it was validation. Not in a cynical way. Not in a calculated way. But in the way many people seek validation throughout their lives. The people who once felt excluded often spend adulthood searching for belonging. And when they finally find it, they want to hold on to it. The Girl Squad may have been a brand. It may have been a cultural phenomenon. It may have even been a strategic image shift. But it was also a group of friendships. And that distinction is important. Because the internet often forces us to choose between two extremes. Either everything was fake, or everything was genuine. Real life is rarely that simple. The friendships were real. The branding was real. Both can exist at the same time. And perhaps that's why the story remains so interesting years later. Not because it was perfect, but because it wasn't. The Girl Squad reflected the contradictions that have followed Taylor Swift throughout her entire career. Authenticity and image. Friendship and publicity. Empowerment and criticism. Connection and isolation. The squad eventually disappeared from public view. But its legacy never really went away. Because even today, whenever Taylor is photographed with a group of friends, people immediately start asking the same questions they asked back in 2015. Who's in the group? Who's out? What does it all mean? And maybe that's the irony of the entire story. The world became so obsessed with Taylor Swift's friendships that it almost forgot the simplest explanation. Sometimes friends are just friends, even when they're famous. Final thought. Taylor Swift's Girl Squad wasn't just a celebrity friend group. It was a cultural moment, a symbol of an era, a rebranding strategy, a friendship circle, and a lightning rod for debates about feminism, popularity, image, and belonging. Whether you view it as empowering or exclusive, authentic or calculated, one thing is undeniable. For a brief moment in the mid-2010s, Taylor Swift's Girl Squad became one of the most influential social circles in modern pop culture. And years later, we're still talking about it.